Hey there, everybody. Mads Rock here, and welcome to the 10.1.5 Fun Tank. Oh, this tank tier list. All right. So we're going to be going over how fun the tanks have been in 10.1.5, whether you should gear them, whether you should alt them, or main them, whatever you want to do. This is a fun tank tier list, so obviously this is purely subjective. I have been playing all 6 tanks on the regular all season, they've been a lot of fun. And now we have the introduction of Augmentation Evoker into the mix, which will skew some results. But here we go. And to those of you that have been watching, I thank you so much for your continued patronship. I am getting a new PC. It's ordered. It's on the way. I have a kind viewer who's also sending me some audio equipment, and I am working at getting my audio issues resolved. Thank you so much. It is going to get better. It's give me a little bit of time. Thank you. All right. So, like, comment, subscribe, Patreon, Discord, Twitch, all that fun stuff. So let's just go into them in order. Now, Blood DK, it just got a 10% buff, like last Tuesday as of recording this. And holy shit show, Batman, this tank is incredibly fun. Now, damage is S tier. Like, oh my god. I did 140k damage with an Augvoker in a Brackenhide Hollow overall. That's not just a pull. That was overall. There was a couple of those pulls. I was straight up the top damage. Busted! So much fun. But the gameplay still does have some issues, so I'm going to put this into A tier. The self-healing is absolutely crazy, reaching 400k HPS at times. The problems are with the tree themselves and how limiting they can be towards what you want to get. Just swapping out one talent for one thing or another is incredibly kind of devastating to how the spec works. And can really be troublesome. Well, I love the idea of, okay, if I take this talent, I'm going to lose this, but there needs to be a balance, right? And for Blood, it feels like that balance is way off. It really does. And it really sucks to lose one of the few things because your tree is so rigid to begin with that some options, Gorfine's Grasp, aren't even an option half the time, are incredibly difficult to take. So for that, I am knocking it out. But man, if they could just get a rework on their spec and class tree, not even a full rework, just a reshuffling around, take some talent nodes, make them a little bit less points or whatever. Kind of, there's a couple of those talents as well where they could just, merge them into one and it would be no loss. Like, things like that. Just a small little bit, man. Small little bit. It could go an insanely long way for Blood. But that 10% buff, ooh, she's fun. She's fun. Brewmaster. Now, Brewmaster has 2 different rankings for me. Brewmaster, out of all of these specs, I feel is one of the squishiest. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I am a Brewmaster scientist and I know every little bit. There definitely are some times where I know I'm doing wrong, but sometimes I'm looking at chat, because a lot of people like watching Brewmaster play, and I'm trying to read chat while tanking dungeons, and sometimes it doesn't always equate. But that kind of stems for the problem for me. If I am not solely focused on that rotation and what's in front of me, I actually have a little bit more of a harder time keeping up what I should be doing and what I should be doing more properly, because this spec is a lot more nuanced. But that being said, that is also a pro. Because it is nuanced, man, does it feel good to get some of those ramps. Our pressing advantage was really, really nice for me. It removed a little bit of button bloat, gave me mini ramps here and there, helped my overall, just nice in general, especially because, for some odd reason, people are always saying the most interesting things in chat right when I hit Weapons of Order. It's just how it works. So with Augment Evoker, though, man, they get a massive amount of armor compared to what they have, which, by the way, if you didn't know, Brewmaster is the lowest armor tank by far, and the stagger buff from Ebb and Might is actually really nice and incredibly noticeable. And this makes the tank incredibly fun for me. I would be B tier without an Augmentation Evoker, and A tier with an Augment Evoker. If I have an Augment Evoker in the party, I am jumping at a chance to get on my Brewmaster. Even with the 20% spinning crank kick nerfs and 5% keg smash, the spec is just so fun. But that leads me to what needs to get worse. So we're going to put this in B because you're not always going to have an Augmentation Evoker in your party. But Augmentation Evoker has a passive that outside of a raid environment, their skills or their Evan Might is more effective. Well, what makes it, when something is very good for Brewmaster and Keys, it is outright completely busted in raid. And I think a passive like that gives them an increased stagger amount outside of a raid environment would actually be insanely huge for the spec, and it doesn't even need to be that much. But this would allow them to tune Brewmaster in and outside of the raid incredibly separately in a way that, you know, us stat nerds would understand, but in a way where the average person picking up the spec won't even notice because they'll feel the exact same. By tuning them properly between both Mythic Plus and Raid, by adding that sort of passive, right? And when you do that passively, the average person picking it up wouldn't really even notice a difference. So there's definitely some ways to kind of work around this and, you know, kind of make it happen. And I think that's something that they need. The class tree is also kind of a wreck. Like, you literally don't want to take any capstones, or don't want to, or don't care. That's another thing. Like, yeah, you can take the summon White Tiger statue, but it does like 0.2% of my damage for an entire run. Why the fuck would I even want it? There's better talents I can get that can keep me alive better or do more damage or whatever for 1 point. Like, I just, whatever. Brewmaster, whatever. Now, Guardian rework just came through on the spec side of the tree, and man, Physical Bear is, oh yeah, Physical Bear. This is such a fun tank to play, but for me, I've been playing it like this all season. I just now get an easier access at Dream of Cenarius, and I get the talents that I want. And separating kind of Maul and Raze together have been really fun for me. I think that's the biggest thing that I actually enjoyed the most, is the fact that both of those are separate. And by the way, guys, I've healed a couple of you guys in Pugs. If you're only ever pressing one or the other, by the way, if you're taking Raze, they're two separate buttons now. Maul for single target, Raze for AoE. Please differ between the two. Great. Also, Iron for uptime is important. That's a huge thing with Fodom players. Oh my god. Okay, Iron, spend Rage on Iron for little PSA. So for me, this fun has already been there for Bear. I just get to do this a lot more easily. I've been playing with Dream of Cenarius all season before the spec rework came in. So that's nothing new for me there, right? The class tree is still a gigantic pile of what the fuck? But the spec tree is pretty dope. Gotta admit, the spec tree is pretty dope. There are some decisions to be made along the way that you can make for certain dungeons that actually feel impactful. Like, do I want to take, you know, Galactic Guardian over Raze for this one because Vortex Pinnacle doesn't have a whole lot of big pulls? Can I get away with it? And single target priority damage is incredibly important in that dungeon on things like Executors, you know, boss damage, the dragons, everything like that, right? Where really is Maul really super worth it on 2 to 3 pulls that there is anything over 5 targets? Because there's really not many, right? So Bear for me, Bear's been so fun all season, but I'm going to go high B. I'm going to be a little bit more critical this time around. High B. And having an Augment Voker in the party, the only real thing that I notice is kind of just damage. I don't really notice the survivability, the healing, or anything like that. The new innate resolve has been absolutely great, but I don't notice that much more. And while it is there and it is noticeable, compared to other tanks like Brewmaster, where it's night and day, it's a little bit different. Now, Protection Paladin. Protection Paladin came in high in the season, was the meta tank, and has slowly fallen from grace in the meta. And in all honesty, seeing a lot of Fodom Protection Paladins had made me not want to play it. I am this weird guy. I root for the underdog. I like playing specs that not everybody else is playing. And everybody was playing Protection Paladin. Now, I have found myself in the last week or two playing a lot more Protection Paladin than I had before. Because, well, people aren't playing it as much. And I can tell you, a Protection Paladin survivability with and without an Augvoker is actually quite impressive. We did two back-to-back 20 Neltharises just to see kind of how much off healing, what I needed for defenses, and how I needed to cycle. And while some pulls did feel kind of the same, just as a whole, even the healer was like, dude, I barely have to touch you in comparison to how much I had to babysit you before. And that is the difference was the Augvoker there. You know, the healing was stronger, there was more armor along the way, and things like that. So it's kind of back and forth. Now, you could argue that the first one without an Augvoker was more of a warm-up key, being the first key of the day, and then the second one, we kind of already knew what we were doing, so there's a little bit more familiarity there, which kind of does help a lot. But I will tell you, after having played with Augvokers plenty on and off, like no Augvoker in the party, Augvoker in the party, I do definitely feel a difference between Paladin and Brewmaster when kind of going around to. But for all you Prot Pally fans, I'm sorry, I'm putting this in C tier for me. Now, the reason why is aside from how broken Blessing of Freedom is, a lot of the utility is done better just by having an Augment Voker. They do have plenty of stops. They have a bleed removal that isn't 5 fucking minutes long, aka Bop, Cauterizing Flame, and there just is some other things in the party that you can get to kind of, you know, while your utility is great, it's no longer as in demand because there are some specs that are filling in those rules a little bit better and allowing more AoE stops coming in and things like that along the way. Now, no one's going to get beaten on how many kicks a Prot Paladin can get, of course, but their tier set is not arguably, is just not interesting. Heartfire is cool, like it's a thing. I hit things with Avenger Shield and Judgment sometimes, and I get like some bonus damage. But it's really kind of non-interactive. You were going to be hitting Avenger Shield anyway, right? Where all three of the specs above, their tier set interacts with things a lot better. Brewmaster probably being a little bit least, but Prot Pally's tier is just kind of boring. And I've been playing this version of Prot Pally since 10.0.7 with very little change to the point where I'm like, it's kind of, to me, it's sitting at that C tier. But again, this is not based on performance. I do have to stress that enough. Not based on performance. This is based on personal, objective, fun. Okay? Your list may vary. Protection Warrior. Now, Protection Warrior, man, I want to rank this higher. I really, really do. I want to rank this higher. The tier set, I'm going to go B tier. It's old reliable. I love going back to it. The things you can spell reflect are still incredibly fun. But I just don't find a drive to want to play this. If I'm going to a certain dungeon and I want to help my friends get a specific portal or whatever, there's just a tank that can do it better. Prot Warrior can reliably do it. I know where my strengths, I know where my weaknesses are, I know what shield block can do, I know where spell reflects. But there's just a tank that can do more in that dungeon and reliably do it better, where I don't have to try as hard. But it's still Zugs, still a lot of fun. The playstyle is still incredibly fun, as it has been, but it hasn't changed either, for better or for worse, because the playstyle is really fun, right? Going back to it, it still feels like just going back to Prot Warrior, which is incredibly nice. But you see all of these spec changes, right? Brewmaster just got some changes, Prot Pally got some changes, Bear got some changes, and it just kind of loses itself along the way. And while there is a tanky noticeability, with Augment Voker in the party, it's it's there. I notice it, but it's I don't feel it as impactful as Brewmaster or Protection Paladin. Like, both of those, I definitely feel an Augvoker in the party. Like, definitely feel it. Where Prot Warrior's kind of like, I feel it, but it's not like... I feel it... I think it's probably a little bit more impactful than Bear, but kind of feels just a little bit better. And lastly, we're going to talk about Vengeance Demon Hunter. Now, if you heard me talk... The last fun tier list that I did like this, Vengeance was top tier, super crazy fun, and it still is. On Fort Weeks. On Fort Weeks, I like to play the high risk, high reward frailty build. No last resort, all Zug, pure damage, fiery brain uptime, let's go. But I find myself struggle busing to play that in higher keys, just due to kind of the self-sustain of Vengeance is not what it used to be at all. And this spec tree, by the way, is in an insane need of a rework. And before you get up in arms and tell me how fucking good Vengeance is right now, I want you to take that tier set away from Vengeance. Take the tier set away from Vengeance, then tell me how good they are right now. That tier set is the biggest band-aid propping up any fucking spec tree in this game, and I don't think there's a higher one. Without that tier set, Vengeance is not even in the goddamn discussion as a viable tank in higher end keys. It's not. Whenever anyone comes into my stream, my channel, my Discord, whatever, and asks, hey man, does Vengeance get any better? Because I'm finding this really tough right now. My first thing is, do you have 4-piece yet? And they're like, nope. Go get 4-piece, then tell me a difference. Then they come back a day or two later and they're like, what the fuck, man? This is insane. That tier set is propping up that entire spec tree, and that needs to change. And I'm feeling that a lot now. On fortified weeks, I run the Last Resort build, which I find to not be as fun. The safety of Last Resort is there, and I haven't farmed out the Cheat Death trinket, but don't even think the Cheat Death trinket is enough, because there are times where I just don't feel like I'm tanky enough. The self-sustainability of what Vengeance was in Shadowlands is not there anymore now, right? In Shadowlands, you could do almost blood DK levels of healing. You were bouncy, but I was never felt in danger, and to me, that kind of really hurt. Losing that, and with all of these HP buffs that we're getting, Vengeance is not getting a buff to that self-sustainability. So right now, what's propping them up is, the 40% less damage from Fiery Brand uptime, which is an incredibly fun playstyle, but is only going to be fun for the moment. So this tank was S tier in the first half of this season. I'm bringing them down to A tier, because for me now that I've played with it more than enough and for a long period of time, because obviously this is going to affect things, I'm finding myself not wanting to play it as much on 4 weeks because I can't play the build that I want because I feel just too squishy to play it. And the risk is way higher on 4 weeks than it is on tyrannical weeks. Where on tyrannical weeks, I just feel like an absolute monster. And I do not feel that at all on 4 weeks. And that, it's good that there's variability there, but anytime that a spec is in a point where there are certain weeks, and that's every 2 weeks, that you're just like, maybe just in the back burner this week, doesn't really help. But when this spec, when I'm vibing on this spec, when I go into tyrannical keys, dude, fucking, you can't stop me. Biggest smile on my face, all Zug, let's go all the time, and just go crazy. So that is my tank tier list for 10.1.5 of fun. Again, I'm not into this meta shit, don't give a fuck. I'm time in my 20s, I'm going in, and I'm having a blast with that. This is it. There's no S tier for fun, which is really good. The balance there is kind of close. I do think Paladin actually needs a buff. I think Warrior needs a buff, and I think Brewmaster needs a defensive buff. Again, with Warrior, I'd say defensive buff. An offensive buff would be nice. I still think they're a little bit low in comparison to some other tanks, but I think the spec tree is in need of slight bit of rearranging. But that is it for me today. I hope you guys enjoy your tier list. What do you guys think? I would love to hear your opinion. What is the most fun tank for you in 10.1.5? Again, it's subjective. You're going to have something that's different than me, and I would love to hear what's more fun for you. Bye.